Thank you, Gretchen. The UMR group stands for Upper Mississippi River Region, and it's a 4-state conglomerate of League of Women Voter states, Minnesota, Illinois, Iowa, and Wisconsin. And we work as a group trying to educate and collect information on different kinds of things that have impact to the Mississippi River. For those that you aren't aware, Illinois provides the most input for watershed coming into the Mississippi, and we're kind of interested in doing what we can to reduce the amount of load that we put into the local water systems so they cannot get to the Mississippi River. And that brings me to who our speaker is today, who is Bryan Wagner. He's from the Illinois Tollway Agency. And I saw Bryan give his presentation about 18 months ago when he was out in McHenry County talking to the people putting together a water resource action plan for the county, which was taking into a lot of considerations the information and the experience that Bryan has right now with water, okay, and how to deal with it. So Bryan joined the Illinois Tollway system in 2007 as an environmental planner, but during his tenure, his responsibilities have involved from just doing permit compliance oversight to the agency's leads on Clean Water Act permitting, traffic noise, solid waste, and all other potential environmental subjects. As part of his efforts, he has permitted over $10 billion in roadway construction projects, which have established over 800 acres of land to be protected and restored, along with over 16,000 linear feet of stream restoration via the permitting responsibility, wetlands, and stream mitigations. He's also been involved in a lot of construction, over 67 miles of stormwater management. And also now Bryan is the Tollway's lead for all sustainability initiatives, which includes the development of sustainability policy for the agency, along with overseeing the Tollway's implementation of Federal Highway Administration infrastructure voluntary evaluation sustainability tools. Recently in 2019, Bryan and his team received a Biosolids User Award from the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago at its Sustainability Summit. And that was for the work that Bryan and his team has been doing and studying the effectiveness of biosolids as a soil enhancement and landscape projects. So what I'd like to do now is turn it over to Bryan, and he can take the presentation where he wishes. Sir, it's your turn.
Hey, thanks, Lee. Really appreciate it. And thank you all for the opportunity to not only talk about what I do, but also hopefully give you guys some interesting ideas or concepts to take on and maybe utilize elsewhere, or to present to other folks for them to try and implement, in their respective areas. One thing I will start off with saying is that I'm an expert in nothing but a jack of all. The Illinois Tollway, we have we're a pretty small agency from a people standpoint. And so I was in my current job or in this current life. And so going from high school teaching to, permitting billion-dollar projects, it's been pretty eye-opening to me. But get the opportunity to do some really, really cool stuff. So our current capital program is, for those who are familiar with the system, we widened and reconstructed all of I-90. So from more or less O'Hare out to Rockford. And we did that fast and furious, and that was a lot of work and really cool project, some good opportunities there. Now we're currently doing, on my slides, you'll see 390, 490, or Elgin O'Hare. I think of them as the same. 390 is the east-west section of it. So kind of, coming out of O'Hare, it's the blue line. the smaller blue line section there and kind of in the middle of our system. That's 390 and 490. We're going to connect 90 to 294 on the west side of O'Hare Airport, and so that's 490. I often refer to it as kind of one big project in the Elgin O'Hare as opposed to 390, 490. But when you see it on my slides as 390, 490, I'll probably refer to it as Elgin O'Hare. And then this year, we're really starting to kick off some really big projects on the central tri-state. So that'd be that yellow section that you're seeing there. We're reconstructing and widening the most heavily used, busiest, most congested section of our system, and that being 294, kind of through the heart of Metro Chicago area. Heavily urbanized, not a lot of room anywhere on the system, and I'll get to that some more. All right, let's go ahead and next slide. So stormwater, right? Water is kind of an underlying issue with all environmental subjects, so we can go ahead and just pass through there and on to the next slide. So the tollway, we are a MS4, or we have an MS4 permit. So for those of you not familiar, the EPA/IEPA issues National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permits, so NPDES permits. And for municipalities or larger entities, you get an MS4. So you're a small municipality type thing is how our municipal systems is how it's structured towards. So we've got 5 different major watersheds that we contribute to. I think we have around 71 different outlets to those drainage basins, and the Des Plaines River receives most of the tollway's stormwater. Go ahead and next slide. With all roadway agencies, pollutants of concern are pretty much uniform. You're looking at metals, heavy metals, hydrocarbons, fuel spills, and suspended sediments. The one caveat for, I say most, in the northern section of the country, or those who have more severe winters, chlorides due to winter operations, de-icing, snow events, types of things. So we'll get to these, kind of all of these here throughout the presentation. But now as we roll to the next slide, we're going to start I'm going to start to talk about kind of the thought process or evolution of our stormwater program. And that started with this Bioswale pilot project. Next slide. So in our previous capital program, the tollway reconstructed and widened 294 from just north of O'Hare up to the Wisconsin state line. And as we were going through the concept development of that project, we found that our right-of-way was pretty constrained in the Cook County section of the project area, meaning we didn't have a lot of room outside of what was already our right-of-way. So when you're widening, you need more room for kind of everything, right? I mean, you need more room for a road, but then, all the ancillary things, where are you going to put all that water from the additional impervious that's going to be generated? Those types of things kind of are what are my interests. So about 15, 20 years ago, this just predates me, and pardon me talking fast, but I'm going to go through some of this quickly and slow down when there's more detail to talk through. So about 15, 20 years ago, we kind of came into this subject where it's like, all right, we want to widen the road, but we don't have a lot of room. We have we don't have a lot of room for our stormwater, so we have 1 or 2 options to deal with here, or for addressing it. And one is traditional gray, put it in storm sewers, put it in pipes, large pipes, and then direct discharges to the streams, lakes, rivers in the area. Or we try and do something that's really uncomfortable, nobody's certain of, but has some presumably pretty strong environmental benefits. Well, the uncomfortable one, and we kicked off trying to do something innovative with our stormwater, and that was a large-scale bioswale project. So we reached out to our neighbor, or a big neighbor of ours throughout this section of the project, and that was the Forest Preserve District of Cook County. For those of you who aren't necessarily familiar with forest preserve districts, think of them as conservation districts as well. County Conservation District. So the Cook County Forest Preserve District, I believe, was the first forest preserve district in the state. They run a pretty tight ship, and they're not really interested in people using their land or taking their land, rightfully so. I respect that. Public land is a sacred thing. So we want to do something with our stormwater that wasn't traditional gray infrastructure, and it was going to take some outside the box thinking, and it was going to take everybody getting outside of their comfort zone. And so we landed on this. We came to an agreement with the Forest Preserve District. We established an intergovernmental agreement with them. We're there for 99 years via drainage easements. We have long-term maintenance and reporting commitments. And we've got out of this, there's approximately 6 linear miles of stormwater BMPs. Go ahead and next slide. So what was our criteria for pulling this together and getting buy-in? One, flood control benefits to not only the forest preserve, but the region, and then also pollutant reduction. We had to focus on good, strong green infrastructure benefits and design in order to pull something off when working with the Land Conservation Agency. So, our design was to target a 2-year storm event. For those of you who aren't familiar with roadway stormwater, those smaller, more frequent rain events are the ones that carry the majority of your roadway pollutants. Say we're getting a 4-inch rain in 24 hours. That first half inch of rain that falls on that pavement is going to wash off the vast majority of those pollutants. And then that's, last, 3/4 of the storm event, there's not a whole lot of pollutants associated with that stormwater because, right, I mean, think of anything, you've got a dirty table and thinking, I've got kids. So I'm thinking of like Kool-Aid that's been spilled on a table and, I drop some water on it, that Kool-Aid washes off, and then the rest of the water, as I dump the rest of that glass, is relatively clean. So that's what our kind of the thought process with BMP design. So we've got a 2-year storm event, capture that, treat that to the greatest extent possible, try and reduce the heavy metals and suspended solids that are there through attenuation and infiltration. So slow that water down as much as possible, and then try and infiltrate it where possible as well. Infiltration is kind of an interesting subject. You think, oh, well, let's infiltrate it. There's pluses and minuses to infiltration, and it works in some places and it doesn't work in a lot of places, at least in Chicagoland. And so one thing I'll ask you to take note of is this picture here, where we've got kind of these ditch checks in these cells kind of lined up one after another. This is a traditional tollway wet bioswale. So it rains, water runs off the pavement into the ditch, and these ditch checks attenuate or slow down that stormwater considerably and allow for either gravitational sediment, pollutant uptake of the plants to kind of help improve the water quality. Go ahead and next slide. So we've got 2 general bioswale designs. We've got wet and dry. Now there's fine tweaks between them where we have more like 4 or 5 bioswale designs, but in short, we have wet ones and we have dry ones. We have the wet one that you saw before where we set up ditch checks and slow that water down as much as possible. And then we have dry ones where we have an underdrain. And now with an underdrain, you have to have more slope than the wet one, because if it's flat, then that water is just going to sit in that underdrain and not going to go anywhere. Also, what's the underlying soil condition? There's some places where you can put an underdrain in and then also have good permeable soils underneath. Around here, we have a lot of tight clay soils. And so the permeability rates are really low. So these are our 2 bioswale design types. Presumably going into this, our design assumptions were, we would get better suspended sediments, or I'm sorry, dissolved sediments, TDS, total dissolved solids, out in the wet, and then the total suspended solids, kind of just the sediment and just stuff that you see in the stormwater, we'd have better results in the dry. Go ahead, next slide. So the tollway has a contract with the State Geologic Survey, and they've been out monitoring the bioswales. They actually started monitoring the area, the North Tri-State area, prior to our widening and reconstruction there, and prior to the construction of these bioswales, to get a good baseline of how these things are performing. And so they're still out there monitoring them today because we want to know what's the life of this bioswale system that we're establishing. It was kind of, to our knowledge, the first of its kind of something this large and this magnitude of a kind of a green infrastructure stormwater system for an interstate highway. So what's the term? What's the life of this green infrastructure that we've invested in? Is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? Is it 20? We don't know, but we need to find out what it is to have appropriate understanding of it. So they're still out there monitoring, and my current contract with ISGS expires at the end of 24, and so they'll be monitoring the bioswales through there, and I anticipate getting another contract with State Geologic Survey, so we'll continue the monitoring out there for indefinite future. But as you can see here, on these numbers, we've had some pretty significant reductions in stormwater pollutants in the suspended solids and dissolved solids. Each bioswale and how it functions is different and unique to itself. So these are general averaged numbers that you're seeing here and aren't specific to one bioswale or the other. When you're working in real world scenarios, you don't have tight controlled variables that you would in a laboratory setting. So we've got a lot of places where there's different types of stormwater coming in to the tollway system that affects the performance of the bioswale. So while we design the bioswale to treat the tollway stormwater, you have other inputs coming in that skew that performance. So not to say that it's not performing as well as others, just all of the inputs and influences per the data show that it performs differently. Okay, anyways, next slide. So we go ahead and the next one as well. That's just kind of a title slide. So we went through this process, and it was probably from start to finish with the Forest Preserve District. And I say finish to getting the bioswales, those North Tri-State bioswales constructed. It's probably a solid 7-8 years. And then shortly thereafter, we announced our new capital program, which is the Move Illinois Capital Program. So there's a lot of construction, a lot of reconstruction and widening associated with the program. So we had to think about, all right, well, how are we going to address our stormwater? We had 1 year of data to make decisions off of for the bioswales. And, fortunately, the State Geologic Survey is really good at what they do. And we were able to reach out to them and say, guys, what do you think? Are these things good enough to for us to kind of recreate and utilize as a standard for us? And they're like, yeah, they seem to be working. We don't see any reason why they won't continue to work. We don't have definitive data to put in a final report at this point in time, but they're good. So run with it. And we did. So as Lee, if you caught the introduction, we're going to have over 67 linear miles of bioswales by the end of our project, our program. So, we went all in with bioswales and kind of green infrastructure. And so, stepping back here a bit, the Move Illinois program is announced. How are you going to treat your stormwater? Well, you've got two avenues to do so. You've got bioswales and detention basins. Go ahead, next slide. So not sure how familiar you are with kind of roadway design, construction, but for any big project, typically you have to get a Corps of Engineers permit, and that's Section 404 of the Clean Water Act. So per our Clean Water Act permitting. And so we permit the tollway, we permit our projects, we try and bundle them together. So in as big a project as we can, because you don't want to have to permit individual projects. It's too time consuming and difficult to do. The Corps wants single complete projects. Kind of that's their motto. And so, for I-90, we weren't able to permit the entire 62 miles in one, but we had 3 permits more or less for that 62-mile project. The Elgin O'Hare is 1 project or 1 permit, and the Central Tri-State is 1 permit. So for those projects, we established a water quality volume. And so essentially water quality volume is that first flush that I was talking about earlier with that, with the highest polluted or highest impacted stormwater amount. So we're looking to capture that and treat that volume. So for I-90, we had 3/4 of an inch. Elgin O'Hare, we had 1 1/4 inches. And for the Central Tri-State, we have 1 inch. The volumes vary just based on the project area, availability of space, and kind of what's the sensitivity of the area as well. So not to say one area is more sensitive than the other, but just what we realistically have room to address. So based on the water quality volumes for the projects, that helps kind of get us to our next phase in designing our BMP. So we go to the next slide. So for our bioswales on I-90, because it was so shortly after our North Tri-State bioswales, they're largely a replica of the Tri-State, of the North Tri-State project. So you can see under the wet or above the wet there, you see those ditch checks lined up. So you've got kind of those micro pools that are set up to slow that stormwater down, hold it as long as possible before that water leaves our system. And then the dry, as I said, you wouldn't really be able to tell what a dry bioswale looks like. But that picture is a dry bioswale, and below is kind of the standard for our dry bioswales. So you can see how well you can see it, but there's porous granular backfill, sand backfill within with a pipe under drain there, a perforated pipe under drain. And then the one change that we did make for the 90 bioswales was instead of having kind of the top of that ditch check covered and just having a pipe through the middle, we opened that up, that whole area up and gave it a V shape as opposed to a pipe shape because we were getting some erosion around the top of those ditch checks on those higher rain events. So this helped minimize that erosion. All right, next slide. So the Elgin O'Hare 390, 490, those bioswale designs were similar. We didn't really change a whole lot here. This one, our approach is a little bit different. The reason being is we had to provide water quality volume, not just for the corridor, but sub-watersheds. Pardon me. After working with the regulatory agencies, they're really interested in us treating water on a sub-watershed basis and not kind of on the project as a whole. So digging some huge basin way out, kind of on one edge of the project and saying, all right, well, all our water quality volumes over there. That's not the case here. So what you're seeing here in this exhibit is kind of that approach. It's more of a treatment train approach that we have to our bioswale, our BMP design. So it's a mix of bioswales followed up with detention basins, kind of one staggered after the other, and trying to meet these water quality volumes within sub-watersheds. So it's been tough because the Elgin O'Hare is in a urbanized or pretty urbanized area. So finding space for this is tough, but fortunately, being a new corridor, we're doing a lot of land acquisition, and we're able to make this one work. So go on to the next. And this leads us to kind of the Central Tri-State and where we are today. Finding the green and the gray is definitely the motto of a sort for the Central Tri-State. Like I mentioned earlier, it's our most heavily utilized and urbanized section of any of our roads. So If you look at Google Maps or something like that, you'll see right adjacent to 294, there's not really any open space adjacent to us. And the only open space would be forest preserve land, public lands. So highly constrained right away. So how do we find the green and the gray? Well, we've got some underground detention, which you see there in that picture. It's not always our favorite thing to do, but when in a tight pinch, it's something that we can do. Other things that we've discovered are, we are utilizing some of our our bioswales on this project. But another thing that we've discovered are kind of hydrodynamic separators or vortex systems. And what those are, they're kind of large catch basins that have mechanisms built into them. So they're not automated or anything like that, but they're designed to, you have stormwater inputs into them. And I've got a schematic here in just a minute, I'll show you. But you have stormwater inputs into them and they go through various cells. The stormwater goes through various cells within that catch basin. And that catch basin has various ways to filter out pollutants. And so you can get really effective pollutant removal through these. They're expensive, they take up space, and there's a lot of maintenance associated with them. So, on a decision tree, which I'll show you here just shortly, your ideal scenario is that you've got a nice, wide, meandering bioswale that's open. It's not behind a retaining wall, or you're not boxed in someplace, and nice, gentle slope, things along those lines. But that perfect world bioswale scenario is really hard to come by in the Chicagoland region just because of space constraints. We can go to the next slide. So next one. So the one other treatment process is detention basins. I'm sure you all are familiar with detention basins in one way or another. You've got dry and wet basins. Preferred from an environmental standpoint is wet because you're capturing and typically holding on to some water in perpetuity. That water won't release, it always stays there. And so, you always have some permanent capture there. But with dry, the water fills up and drains eventually. Both work from, pollutant removals. It's just the wet is a little bit more effective. And, something that we're very conscious of and concerned with at the tollway is safety. And a car goes off of our roadway system and ends up upside down in a dry basin. Well, it's a car upside down in a dry basin. It's unfortunate, but it's not that big a deal. It goes upside down in a wet basin and it's a whole lot of no good. So it's something that we're very cognizant of, and trying to make sure, well, we want to push the environmental side. We also have to be safety conscious when we're installing those and making sure they're not in a location where a vehicle could end up upside down in them. Go to the next slide. So lessons learned. Vegetation is key to getting these. Regardless if it's a basin or a bioswale, vegetation establishment is key. Once you do that, then you get rid of a whole list of issues that come along with them. Main thing being erosion, and then second, weeds. Right, those weeds, the frag, the cattails, reed canary, teasel. It's unfortunate, and we still haven't figured out that magic, found the magic wand to address weeds, and especially those with heavily disturbed soils and recently disturbed soils. So they're going to persist, and so we can do things for those, but getting the vegetation established as quickly as possible, the desirable vegetation established as quickly as possible is our best benefit. And then, if you are looking to build some BMPs, one thing you really need to take into consideration is, what's that project as a whole? Because a lot of times for us, kind of the standard approach is, all right, we've got a really big project. Let's build that road, cut that ditch, and then we're going to go on from there and move forward. So cut the ditch, seed, blanket, stabilize it, and then we're going to move forward from there. Well, a year later on our projects, we're going to have a utility contract come through and go and place utility lines through, the right of way. And as part of that, what happens is those bioswales get tore up again. So, understanding kind of the entire scope and life of the construction of that project and making sure that, you place the final seed, the final seed and plugs of the highly desirable things that you want in your BMPs or in your ditches, having that come last and let everybody go through, trounce around, tear it all up, and then the fix at the end isn't that big a deal. So yeah. All right, next slide. Okay, so getting from that forest preserve concept, that first slide to here is about 15 years in evolution and design and thought process at the tollway from a drainage design standpoint. And one really cool thing that we've come up with in the last years, we've published this in our manual, our drainage manual. It's a Bmp Flow Chart. And so it provides designers, our drainage designers. So the tollway will let a contract for a firm, a consulting firm to do detailed design work as part of one of our roadway projects. So this manual and this flow chart make sure that all the designers who win a tollway project are going through this, BMP process appropriately. So if we go to the next slide, Gretchen, oh, you're there. You're there, but you're not. So this BMP flow chart is just, what's your water quality goal? What's your volume? Kind of runs you through a list of all the decision-making processes or questions that will present themselves on a contract that a design firm would have to address. So one big thing is the project within 5 miles of an airport? Why would we care if we're within 5 miles of an airport? Well, FAA and U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and along with the Corps of Engineers, have a memorandum of understanding that, hey, you're not supposed to create any wildlife-friendly or avian-friendly habitat within 5 miles of an airport because birds and airplane engines don't mix well. So we don't want to create something where there's going to be a lot of birds around in those areas. So that's a big trigger for us of, okay, are we within an airport area? Yes or no? And surprisingly enough, in the Chicagoland region, so there's a 5 mile threshold and there's a 3 mile threshold. Within the Chicagoland area, if you put 5 and 3 mile bubbles over all the airports, it covers a whole lot of ground. For one of our mitigation projects, we're like, wait a minute, we can't do any mitigation except for like way out here on these total fringe areas of the region because there's airports all around. It was really surprising. And I'll share a little bit more on that one here in a bit. But if we just go ahead and scroll to the next one, Gretchen. So this is just highlighting, kind of what are the requirements, what are the questions. And unfortunately, I thought it was pretty cool. There's some animation and, whatever associated with these slides, but we don't get to have the fun today. It's all good. So another thing with airports is, it needs to draw down within a certain amount. Hey, you're good. It needs to draw down within a certain amount of time because if you have a bunch of standing water, then you're going to have waterfowl that are more prone to go to those areas. So yeah, you have those. And then let's scroll down just a little bit and then want to look at that center picture there. Well, so yeah, that's the kind of the hydrodynamic separator type thing. So that's kind of our worst case scenario. If we can't do all of these other things for stormwater treatment, then we go to this mechanical method. All right, here we go. Next slide. So chloride offset program. So next slide. Let's see. Water quality regulations. So not only does the Clean Water Act have, is there section 404 of the Clean Water Act, but there's section 401, and then 401 is water quality. And then there's also kind of general use standards that are outside of project permitting. But general use standards for chlorides is 500 milligrams per liter. So if a stream hits at any point in time 500 milligrams per liter of salt, and there's a sample taken of it, we'll save all the details. If a stream exceeds 500 milligrams per liter at any point in time for chlorides, it becomes impaired. And that's a technical term that the IEPA has, and same with US EPA. There's impaired streams. There's impaired streams for all different types of pollutants and constituents, but here we're specifically focusing on chloride. So if it hits 500 milligrams, it's impaired, and then it goes put on a list for developing a Tmdl. A Tmdl is a total maximum daily load. So essentially what they do is they say, all right, here's that stream system, here's the pie, and we're gonna cut that pie up into pieces, and those are your allotments of that pollutant that you're able to have inputs into the stream. And so long as everybody meets those, their pieces of the pie, will meet that 500 milligrams per liter, and the stream will no longer be impaired or be listed. Now, TMDLs are really, really tough to meet. Really, really tough to meet. They're needed, but they're really hard to meet. So we'll go on to the next slide. So the Chicagoland area, we have the tollway. We have 1.6 million vehicles per day. Spring, summer, fall, winter. It doesn't matter. We have a lot of vehicles on our road. And so not to say we use a lot of salt, but we have a lot of vehicles on our road, and we have to maintain a safe roadway network. We don't have tort immunity. So if an accident occurs on our right-of-way, we could be held liable for that at no kind of top cost. So, there's an accident, and somebody's like, well, you didn't put enough salt down, and you've got $5 billion left on your program, so I'm going to sue you for $5 billion. Where a lot of municipalities and government entities, there's a max on what they can be taken to court for. So not just because of that, but in part because of that, we're very safety conscious. We want to make sure that we provide a safe roadway network to to our customers. And so when permitting these three projects, the Elgin O'Hare, the Central Tri-State, and the I-90 projects, they all drain to impaired streams. So that means that they're already full of, they already have enough salt. They can't take any more. So the IEPA says, well, you got to do something about your salt. You can't put any more salt in there. So essentially what we had to do is say, okay, well, there's, this much salt that's going there now. We're going to put in this much more. So we're going to put in a quarter more as part of our project, but we can't do that. So we either have to reduce it ourselves or offset it with others. We can go to the next slide. So the Elgin O'Hare was the one that really kind of brought this to our attention. It's a new facility. And so if you remember on that previous slide, the Elgin O'Hare had the most salt that we had to reduce our offset because it's a brand new facility. It's not an existing road. We either had to try and reduce 4,800 tons, approximately 4,800 tons of salt from the system ourselves, or come up with some way to offset that or reduce it from the larger region. And what that was is we established an offset program. So similar to kind of carbon credits or something along those lines. Essentially, we said, hey, adjoining municipalities, or we call it tier 1 municipalities, those municipalities that directly abut 390 or 490 or anything on the Elgin O'Hare system. If you guys would be willing to come up with a plan which you can demonstrate how you're going to reduce salt within your municipality, the tollway will help fund that or possibly fund it in its entirety. So kind of a grant program for establishing, upgrading their winter operations. So if we go to the next slide. So as part of that effort, we worked with one of the really strong watershed planning group, and that was the DSRCW, DuPage River Salt Creek Work Group. They're great work group. If any of y'all are interested in learning more about them, I highly recommend it. You just do a quick Google search on them. I believe they webcast all of their meetings, but just really thorough and really knowledgeable about the drainage systems or the drainage basins that they oversee and work on. They do some really cool projects and do some really neat stuff. And so DSRCW was the one that kind of presented this subject to me. They're like, hey, Bryan, we understand you have this big project, or the tollway has this big project, but you got a big issue that you got to get over, and that's salt, because you're going to put a lot more salt into the system. And that's one of our key things that we're trying to reduce is salt in the municipalities and in the watersheds via winter operations. So what if you came up with an offset program? It's like, all right, sure, let's try and get this figured out. So we partnered with the DSRCW to come up with this offset program. And essentially, this is kind of the basis of the math for it. And this is part of our 401 permit requirements. So our IEPA, US EPA permit requirements for the corridor. So we looked around, we looked at, who's contributing or what's contributing within this project area from a salt perspective, from local roads and then also interstate. And then, the local roads are arterial roads. That was 14 tons a lane mile. The interstates or freeways was we found to be about 39 tons or 40 tons per lane mile per year. So take those averages, multiply them out by the number of lane miles, and that gives us the amount of salt that we need to, that's currently being put into the system, and then the amount of salt that we're going to have to offset. And we'll go to the next slide. So this is in essence kind of what I've been talking about here, and that, as part of that 401 permit, the anti-degradation of impaired waters, we can't put any more of that pollutant into the system. So essentially IEPA is like, figure it out. If you want a permit, figure it out how you're going to do it. Okay, we're going to partner with the locals, and we're going to do things ourselves. So not to say we're putting it all on the locals, but everything that I'm presenting here or talking about here, the tollway is also implementing. So kind of our commitment is, we are currently, or at the start of the project, the permitting process of the project, we were at 39.7 tons per lane mile. We need to pull that into 31.8 tons per lane mile. So a 20% reduction. That's the tollway's commitment. And then with the municipalities that we're partnering with, we're looking for them to get a 20% reduction as well. So we're not asking for anything more than 20%. If they can offer that up and they think they can get to it, great. But we're not going to ask anything of them that we wouldn't ask of ourselves. Next slide. So again, tier 1 communities, those are the municipalities that are directly adjacent to the roadway or that the roadway bisects. And this is just a quick image of that. We can go on. I'm running short, so go ahead and next slide. So what are the steps? Anybody who's familiar with winter operations and winter operations practices and kind of, let's call it cutting edge. What's new? Moving away from rock salt and becoming more reliant on liquids is the thing that's going to get us there. There's a lot of unease in the operations, like on the maintenance side of things, with the guys who have been driving the plows for decades and switching over to all liquids. And you can't do it overnight because in one of our meetings, somebody gave me, I've gotten two good quotes that will live with me for pretty much as long as I'm in my position. And one was, Bryan, if there's an accident on a local road, they're banging out a bumper. If there's an accident on our road, you're digging a new hole someplace. Okay, that was early on in the moving salt conversation. And so that guy wasn't really, he's retired from the tollway now, but he wasn't too interested in having salt efficiency conversations with me. So it's like, okay, understood. I'm going to find other ways to work this idea or this concept than through you. And the other one is, I'm running a fine line between being very green and progressive and having a dangerous road environment. And that's so true because, right, conditions in winter storms change, within I say a moment's notice, they change pretty quick, right? So you might have something where, you got a nice fluffy snow coming down, no big deal. Well, then it cools off or warms up, and then you've got a freezing ice or freezing rain condition. And freezing rain is it's horrible. Anytime you have ice scenario in the winter, it's a material suck, and it's just really hard for the maintenance guys to get ahead of. So right, if somebody's out there, hey, I'm looking at this slide here, we're running 100 pounds per lane mile with 20 gallons of brine at the same time, and it's going great, but conditions change, and then that great condition quickly turns into a dangerous condition because they're not 100% prepared for that weather change. So anyways, moving away from rock salt to liquids is huge. Making sure spreaders are calibrated appropriately. You know how much salt's coming out of the back of the truck. So when you put it on a 100-pound spread rate, you're getting 100-pound spread rate and you're not getting 500 pounds. Things along those lines, really looking at those spread rates. Do we need a 500-pound? We've got a 500-pound setting, and it was something that we used a lot in the past, but we're finding more and more that we don't necessarily need to be reliant on that. So here's the list of things that we're doing. We're trying to increase liquids as much as possible, and by pre-wetting our salt. We haven't gotten into anti-icing too much yet. Anti-icing is when you go out and do kind of the safety strips or something along those lines. You have a liquid truck just spraying a brine solution on the road. We have enough traffic to where we haven't been able to figure out just yet if anti-icing is going to be beneficial to us or not. Is that brine solution going to be picked up on tires and leave our system? Are we going to lose the benefit of that brine if we spray it before the storm? A lot of places, if it's low volume, you can anti-ice a day or two in advance. Our system, we have too much traffic for that. So we're trying to figure out where that sweet spot would be if anti-icing would be beneficial. All right, next slide. And I recognize I'm 7 minutes over by my clock, so I'm going to talk fast. So the next slide is dirt. You can go ahead to one more down. Yep. Materials, you can go ahead and soil reuse guidelines. So another thing that we're focused on from a water perspective is our dirt, believe it or not. So you take a scoop of dirt out, can it be reused? Can it not be reused? Does it need to go to a landfill? Does it need to go to a CCD facility? Well, there's constituents regardless of, if it's, from a nature preserve or from, the west side of O'Hare. I say the west side of O'Hare because it's kind of dirty. There's constituents in that dirt of varying degrees. And so sometimes it's safe to reuse that dirt, even if there isn't, I think probably the majority of you are pulling from groundwater or have groundwater wells, or your municipality has a groundwater well and aren't necessarily pulling from the lake, like I am here in the city. So, is it safe to reuse our dirt? And that is, we're looking at, stormwater filters through our soil, gets down, that water picks up the constituents in that dirt and makes it down to somebody's groundwater well. Are we going to be negatively impacting that well or not? So that's a level of effort that we're giving on kind of a stormwater perspective. And our material reuse perspective is we want to be cognizant of that. And the last thing we want to do is be a cause for any groundwater impacts that would impact any of your wells. All right, next slide. Okay, so these are the fun projects, the wetland mitigation projects. So for our big construction projects, so the Elgin O'Hare, the Central Tri-State, and I-90. One unique thing that we do at the tollway is we typically do what's called permittee responsible mitigation. So there's a number of different avenues you can take for mitigating wetland impacts. And the Corps' preference, and I totally understand it, is for you to buy mitigation credits at a mitigation bank. Mitigation banks are large, typically large tracts of land, 1,000+ acres, that a banker or wetland banker goes out and studies and says, okay, this hypothetical 1,000 acres plot of land, I'll be able to establish 500 acres of wetland credit. Now, I won't get into the details on establishing wetland credit because I'm running late, but I have a project come up and I have 5 acres of wetland impact. I could just reach out to a wetland banker and say, hey, I need 5 acres of credit for this permit. They sell me 5 acres of credit. They give me a certificate that shows, all right, I've purchased 5 acres of credit from that bank. I give that to the Corps of Engineers, and the Corps of Engineers recognizes it because they permitted that mitigation bank. They say, all right, your wetland mitigation is taken care of. Easy enough. It's done. And it makes kind of the whole tracking process really easy. Now then, we have some big projects that come up, the Elgin O'Hare, I-90s, the Central Tri-State. And, we've found that, we can take on mitigation ourselves and have meaningful benefit to the region and to everybody. So not just natural resources, but to you and I. So this slide shot, or this shot here, is of the Pine Dunes wetland mitigation site. So Pine Dunes is in Lake County. So anybody who's in the region, it's just west of 94, just south of the border. Roskins, I think it's, I don't have a good crossroad there for you. I'll see if I can't pull it up while I'm talking about it. Yeah, is that 173? Dude, nope. Exit Russell. Yeah, if you exit Russell, it's right at Hunt Club Road and I guess north of 173. It's off of Hunt Club on the west side or east side of Hunt Club. But it's a 315-acre site. The Forest Preserve District had just purchased that. Lake County Forest Preserve had just purchased the site. It was old ag. They didn't have funds to restore it. We reached out. We established an intergovernmental agreement with them, and we essentially built them a turnkey forest preserve. So we work with them to make sure that we get all the wetland mitigation credit we need out of it, all while putting in, you can see that trail system. I think it's about a 3.5-mile trail network that goes around the site. There's boardwalks and bridges over the wetland areas. There's some kind of overlook areas. We have a parking lot, and there's a restroom facility that got built into it. So it's a really cool site. We scroll down to the next one. This is for I-90 project, and this is down just south of the Orland Grasslands, immediately south of Orland Grasslands. So Cook County, this is Cook County Forest Preserve, or Forest Preserve District Cook County. Partnered with them, same concept. It was old ag that they just recently purchased. They didn't have money programmed for the restoration of it. So we worked with them to say, hey, give us access to the land. We'll work with you on the design of it and make sure it's, on board, you're on board with it and it meets your vision. And we'll also put in, a driveway, parking lot, trail system, bridges, boardwalks, overlook areas. So again, building a forest preserve. So this one, so Orland Grasslands and Pine Dunes are sites that the Tollway led the construction on. And then now we'll go to the next slide. Springbrook Creek is in DuPage County, and this is a project with DuPage Forest Preserve, or Forest Preserve District, DuPage County. And this one's interesting because when it's all said and done, we'll have restored almost 2 miles of stream of Springbrook Creek. So just upstream of this, we have some Elgin O'Hare waters mitigation. And then this site here, this is in Blackwell Forest Preserve. And there's an old dam there in the forest preserve that dammed up Springbrook. And so we didn't necessarily remove the dam. We left the dam in place. And this one, the tollway is funding the work, but the Forest Preserve is actually conducting this work. So we didn't remove the dam. The dam was left in place as flood control. It's kind of a big culvert, but we cut a new channel just to the west of where the existing channel is, and meandered that new channel down to a new confluence, or to meet with the existing channel, and so that dropped. That dropped the pool, and in the pool, what was the old pool area will now be all wetland areas. There's a regional trail, portion of a regional trail that's getting constructed as part of this project, and this one's pretty cool. It's pretty rare that, in an urban area, that we get to, a transportation agency gets to have take credit for restoring over 2 linear miles of stream. And so pretty excited about this one. I kind of, I get amped up about it. I like it. If I had more time, I'd talk a whole lot more about it. But one really cool thing on this, those root wads there, it's bank stabilization. So what they did, they had to cut down some trees, and they're scrubby trees. As part of the project, did some tree removal. So they cut the top of the tree off, and then they just yanked the root wad out, and then they plug it into the bank. Well, they don't plug it in. They kind of lay open the bank, make a sandwich, put those root wads down, and those root wads, so the flow of the stream will come up against that section of the bank, and that's stream bank protection. So provides great habitat for, macroinvertebrate, fish, stuff like that. So really cool feature, and thought worth sharing there. Go on to the next slide. So a couple other initiatives that we've got a landscape master plan, and I'll just touch briefly on these. We're planting 58,000 trees throughout the tollway network. We partnered with the Morton Arboretum on this one. They helped give us some guidance on it, and this is kind of where we got that Biosolid award from. Is we're utilizing the MWRD's biosolids as part of a soil supplement, soil supplement on this project. So 58,000 trees throughout the tollway system. We found kind of the main thing that we found here, takeaway for most of you. A lot of times you like to use bigger trees, bigger shrubs, more, want something to show for it, and you don't want to hit it with your mower. I get it. But at least in our roadway environment, we found that using younger planting stock is a bit better for us than using, say, something that's kind of 5 to 10 years old. So something that might be kind of 6 to 10 feet in height, or 3 to 5 inches in diameter, because the younger the tree, or whatever it is, the more adaptable it is to those environments. So you get something that's a little bit older, and it's going to struggle a bit more with the new environment, especially a harsh roadway environment. 58,000 trees, and I think when it's all said and done, about 6 years. And then I think our last, here's some pictures of it. We've got various planting approaches. So we've got some dense plantings and scattered plantings. And our last initiative that we're a part of is a pollinator program, or pollinator initiative. Monarch butterfly is a candidate species for being federally listed. In recognition of that, prior to it becoming a candidate species, and kind of probably about 5 years ago at this point, understanding the difficulties that pollinators were having throughout the region and the country, one of the things that we focused on was trying to incorporate pollinator-friendly habitat wherever possible. So those mitigation sites, there's a lot of pollinator habitat that's being established there. And then our BMPs, we found that swamp milkweed does quite well in our right of way and in those BMP areas. And then also on our back slopes, we don't really want to put that four slopes. So you've got the road, you've got the slope coming down to the ditch, and then you've got the ditch here. So from the ditch up to the road, pretty harsh environment. There's not a lot of stuff that really likes it there, and understandably, I don't like it too much being in our ditches. It's loud, scary. dirty. But the back slopes, from the ditch back to that right-of-way fence, we found there's quite a bit of usable space back there. And so in those areas is where we're trying to incorporate as much of our pollinator seed mixes as possible. Detention basins around the sides, the back sides of the detention basins and things along those lines is where we're trying to incorporate those. So yeah, in a nutshell, 20 minutes late. I apologize for the issues with my incompetency on managing Zoom. But yeah, it's always kind of stormwater, green infrastructure in a nutshell. I'm happy to take any questions, answer any questions that I can. I understand that we're late. Here's my contact information. So yeah, I can stick around for a while if you guys can.
Any questions from anybody? We're in a small little, like half a dozen. There we go.
Can you hear me?
Brian?
Yeah, Rosemary.
Isn't there a wetland mitigation project near Buffalo Grove off of Lake Cook Road also? Is that you, or it might be somebody else?
That might be IDOT.
Yeah, IDOT, yeah.
Or somebody else.
Yeah.
I don't think we have we have some mitigation near Lake Cook, adjacent to the tri-state, but it was species mitigation and not wetland mitigation.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so Eastern Massasauga rattlesnake habitat was in that area. So we have some Massasauga rattlesnake habitat mitigation there, but not wetland.
Okay, it must be IDOT.
Yeah.
Oh, Brian, thank you so much for your presentation. I'm really happy you get excited about combining conservation and mitigation and putting it all in a package. My question is, are you also the person that does the research, or is there someone separately or a different department that's actually keeping tabs on exactly what is happening and what the long-term effects are? As you said at the beginning, that some of that just isn't in yet. You just don't know. But is it a separate department or?
No, I'm the manager of it. So I manage all things environmental for the tollway. But I have contracts for people that do that research for me, or for the tollway. So I've got a contract with the State Geologic Survey, who does water quality and quantity monitoring throughout the system for various aspects. One for the BMPs that I was talking about, and then also for chlorides, looking at our chloride inputs into or throughout the system. And then I've also got the Natural History Survey. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but the Illinois has the Prairie Research Institute. They've kind of been bounced around. They were part of DNR. They were their own entity, and now they're part of U of I. And so the Prairie Research Institute has a State Water Survey. The Geologic Survey has Natural History Survey, and then they've got like a sustainability survey. I forget what that one is, but they're the state surveys. And so I have contracts with INHS and ISGS, so Natural History Survey and Geologic Survey, that do a lot of the research on the long-term performance. And when I say long-term, it's in relative terms. From the water perspective, we're looking at it in a longer period of time than the habitat restoration. So the wetland mitigation, we have performance standards that we have to meet per our permits, and they're the relatively standard performance standards that the Corps of Engineers has for mitigation sites. And so once we meet those performance standards, we coordinate with the Forest Preserve District. We do inspections, say, hey guys, we met, the sites met the performance standards. We all go out, take a look at it. We're all in agreement that, all right, yep, we've met performance standards. There's no issues with kind of the stuff that we've built into it for them, the trails, the parking lot, anything like that. And then at that point, we turn it over to the forest preserve districts. So that's typically a 5 to 7 year period.
Thank you.
A question on the mile-long bridge we're all working on now.
Yeah.
Where do you put your bioswales there? I mean, it's, you're way up, you got a mile to deal with all the
green and the gray.
coming up.
That's the green and the gray. The whole central tri-state has made us, we had kind of that decision tree, that flow chart was coming together nicely. And then we came into kind of the central tri and it was like, oh, we don't have room for any of this. And there's going to be a whole lot of retaining wall. And we learned on the west side or the east section of 90 that bioswales behind retaining walls aren't exactly anybody's favorite thing because they're incredibly difficult to access. And, keeping on our maintenance, mines and, areas that they need to focus on. So the mile long, we're running the water to various places. So on all of our bridge projects, we don't do any direct discharges to any of the streams. So it goes north or south to, call it mainland, or Lasma Island, which is MWRD drying beds for the biosolids. We purchased quite a bit of land from them, and we've got a large detention facility there as well.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah,
that's interesting too. Yes.
Yeah.
This is Sue Johansson. I'm in Muscatine, Iowa, and I'm reading the chat, and there was a person who had to leave early and wanted to know if you know anything about plans to reduce phragmites.
Yeah, it's a good question. The short answer is no. We don't have, like I said, I was looking for that magic wand to eliminate teasel, frag, cattails, reed, canary, but unfortunately it doesn't exist. They like highly disturbed soils. Fact of the matter is, and as I pointed out in one of the first slides, we have pollutants that leave our system with every rain event, and they like kind of those impacted waterways or impacted soil types. They thrive in those. So management and vegetation establishment, desirable vegetation establishment is our goal as quickly as possible. And then after that, we can do chemical treatments and things along those lines via herbiciding. But that, there's pluses and minuses to herbiciding. You don't want to spray a bunch of chemicals to try and get rid of something, because inevitably you're going to have some negative impacts associated with that. One thing that we are currently piloting, and one of my coworkers is the lead on it, but we call it Invasives to Energy. And so we have a project with the University of Loyola, or Loyola University in University of Yukon, and we're going out and we're harvesting those phragmites. So we're going out and cutting them in our basins and trying to determine, one, can we, are we, by getting, if we harvest them at the end of the growing season, are we removing pollutants from that system? Because that frag thatch is going to brown and die, right, with the year, and it's going to decompose into whatever basin it is, and whatever is in that is going to get reintroduced to that system. So if we were to go out there and harvest those and claim those, are we reducing pollutants, pollutant loadings associated with that life cycle? So by removing that portion of the life cycle, are we reducing pollutants, and by how much? Is there a potential beneficial byproduct to that, and can we turn that into some type of bioenergy by compressing it and turning it into briquettes that can be used to burn in various furnace types. And so finding a market for that is a bit difficult. Another thing that we're exploring is furthering our partnership with MWRD and seeing if they might be able to utilize some of those clippings in their biosolids because they need some organic material like that. But we have to be cognizant of how much we give them because they don't want too much of it. And then by harvesting them, you're also, controlling somewhat of the spread. Now, again, I'm not an expert in anything, jack of all, but my understanding is with frag, it spreads primarily through the rhizomes and not necessarily through seed, fortunately, because it produces a whole lot of seed. Now, cattails and other things, they spread through seed. So capturing those seed, capturing as much seed as possible through that harvesting and, controlling populations that way. So we're just into, what are we in? I think we're in the third year in that study. And that will, if it proves effective and beneficial, it'll be a while before we get that implemented on a large scale. I say a while, 5-10 years before it becomes standard operating procedure for us, because it would require a lot of procedural changes in how we manage our right-of-way and equipment that we need to purchase as well. So, but it's a really intriguing concept. So maybe not the exact question that or response they were looking for, but it's on our mind. Weeds are definitely on my mind, and I'm always looking to address them one way or another. We're pretty capital program focused right now, and as soon as kind of that load starts to lighten up, then we'll be able to look out at the kind of longer term, how we manage all this new infrastructure we built.
Well, thank you, Bryan. This has been very, very, very informative, and we all thank you for your time. As far as the recording goes, we're going to make it accessible. Gretchen and I will work on that through either our website or mailing out to the people who we have identified have been part of the conversation today. So thank you very much, and continue your good work with your team, Bryan. This is wonderful. I'm glad to know that the Illinois Highway Tollway out there is thinking about the plants, the animals, and the things, and the humans that have to interface with that. So thank you very much.
Yeah, happy to be a part of it. Thank you for the opportunity. Anybody has any questions, you want to reach out to me, my contact information's there. So yeah, I'm happy to provide any information. I'm glad, to be able to be a part of this and share what I'm up to. And it's, nice to know that it is appreciated. So we try, we care, and we try.
Thank you very much, sir.
All right, thank you. Y'all take care. Stay safe.
Gotta watch.
Yeah, I know.